So you should be able to see my screen, my
Yes, I do.
slides. Okay. All right, great. Oh, and there's a notice about the recording. Good. Glad you remembered to turn that on. Also, everyone, I'm gonna, in addition to the recording that Rich is making, I'm gonna send a copy of these slides, a PDF of my slides, and you'll have those. To refer to. And I mean, the main reason is because there will be links in these to other resources. So, for example, here's my contact information. You can email me. You can visit my website, and I hope you'll subscribe to my newsletter. I send one out about once a month, and I try and offer tips and things on how to do stuff, and also share information about events and learning events going on around uh, well, things I'm doing and things I'm participating in. So all of those links will be embedded in here, and you'll be able to access those things. For those who don't know me, I'm a dad. I live in Indianapolis, Indiana, where we currently have 6 degrees. We're up from -3 this morning, so we're having a heat wave here. Um, uh, I have a granddaughter, Maddie. She's 3 years old. I'm not allowed to show pictures of her on social media, so you just have to imagine how cute she is. Um, I'm married to Nancy Lee, who is a wonderful artist, jeweler, and metalsmith. And It's just a great inspiration to me to watch how she creates and makes metal do her bidding. And again, these are links. If you again throughout, if you click on these links, it takes you out. There's her website, so you'll find other resources in here as we as you look at these slides later. I enjoy creative writing about as much as I do photography. I'm working on a little book right now that's inspired by photographs that has short stories associated with it. I got my start in photojournalism, and I worked for a as a photojournalist for a period after graduating from IU. And then I jumped ship. I went back to got my master's in education, and I left professional photography for a period of time, and I worked in corporate America for about 30 years. Um, I started this company in 2010, and I haven't looked back. It's been 14 years of just fun and learning. I've traveled all over the world with small groups. I just got back from Calabria in the toe of the boot of Italy for 2 workshops there. And It's just been a lot of fun. I just love being out in the field with my cameras, whichever camera I have, sharing with others and learning from others. So, um, that's kind of my story. And Rich, before I go any further, I just want to make sure I check with you on how much time do I have tonight? We talked about 60 to 90 minutes, including Q&A. Tell me what my boundaries are here.
Yeah. 90 minutes is good with Q&A.
Okay, all right. Well, there's never enough time, so if you have to get the hook out and pull me off the stage to get to, just go ahead and do that. So, what I wanted to do tonight, I know many of you are big camera photographers. Some of you may be using your iPhone too. More and more people are. I've been using an iPhone let's see, the iPhone 4 was my first in 2009. And it's obviously come a long way since then. And the latest 15 Pro Max has offered some new features that are just mind-blowing. And what I'd like to do today is go through and review some of those things, talk a little bit about the settings that you need to set to get certain features to work, how to control that, and then some of the features of the native camera in the iPhone, live mode, portrait mode, burst mode, night mode, some of those things that are part of that native camera. Um, and then I'll take a look at we'll take a look also at a couple of different apps for processing images. I love Snapseed and I love Lightroom Mobile, but there are dozens of different tools out there today for stylizing and editing our photos. We'll talk a little bit about RAW as well, something that we can now do with these mobile phones and get a little bit more creative control in our editing. Um, I do want to say that regardless of the camera you have, photography is not about the camera. You guys know that already. As a photographer, we are the most important part of that whole scenario. And my friend Kevin Raber always talks about how much gas photographers have, gear acquisition syndrome. We all want the shiniest, the latest, the newest gadgets and all that, more megapixels. But those things alone are not going to make our pictures better. It's the other stuff. It's the things that we do, the decisions we make about what we include in the frame, how we arrange those things. So if you don't have the latest and greatest camera, don't despair. You still have the iPhone is still one of the best cameras that most of us have ever owned, regardless of which model you have. So just keep that in mind. We are seeing the gap narrow, though, between what our big camera will do and what the phone will do. We're now able to shoot 48 megapixel RAW files. And with the 15 now, we can also shoot a 48 megapixel HEIF file, which is a newer format, more contemporary format. It's not RAW. It doesn't have that same data, but it does give us a lot of data to work with. It's smaller than a JPEG, has a lot of advantages, and I've been experimenting with it, and I really like the results that I'm getting. If you have a phone before the 12, which I think RAW processing, ProRAW came out with the iPhone 12. If you don't have a 12 and you can't select ProRAW in the native camera, you can still create RAW files with other camera apps like Lightroom for mobile or Camera Plus 2 or Halide. These are all apps that even if you don't have the latest iPhone that includes ProRAW, you can still get the advantage of RAW by using these other tools. We can now get a long exposure, handheld, with no neutral density filters, no tripod. I mean, it's really amazing to me that we can do this with these phones now, and keep our our load really light. The other thing that's happening is our ability to get really good low light photos, night photos. There is a feature that came out, and again, I might have this wrong, but I think it came out with the 11 or maybe the 12. It's called night mode. And what happens here is that when the camera senses that it's dark enough, it activates night mode. And when night mode is activated, it's going to decide based on how bright or how dark it is, how long it's going to shoot for. It's not like a long exposure that we get with our big cameras. With our big camera, you open that aperture and you leave it open for 30 seconds or a minute, and that whole time light's coming in to the sensor. With an iPhone, it's different. The iPhone is going to be shooting maybe 1 second exposures, but it's going to do as many as it can do in a 1 to 3 to 5 to 10 second period. And then it takes all those photos and stacks them together. And what happens is that in shooting in that low light, you're going to get noise. It happens with our big cameras too. But with the computational photography, the noise on all those images that were taken, the noise is random. It appears in a different location on every one of those photos. So when they get stacked together, the noise disappears. So you're left with a very sharp and clean low light image. I mean, I threw this in here because it just boggles my mind. The idea that I can't even fathom 35 trillion operations per second. But that's what's happening here. We're using technology and machine learning, artificial intelligence. All these things are within the hardware of this phone and doing all this stuff kind of behind the scenes. One of the things that I love working with is the portrait mode. That first came out with the iPhone 7, the 7 Plus. And it was the first time that we had the ability to focus on a face or a flower or a pet, and then let the background drop off into that beautiful blur that's so attractive in portraits. Well, that tool has been improved upon with each new iPhone release. And this last release, they've really added some things that push it into a whole nother realm. And we'll be looking at some of that when I plug in my phone here and start showing some things. The other thing that I've been doing since the 11 Pro Max is infrared. I love photographing infrared with my big cameras. I have a Fuji X-T2 converted to 720 nanometer infrared, but you can make infrared photos with your iPhone by attaching a filter and then doing certain things when you shoot. And it's really fun. If you're interested in that, we've got a Facebook group with over 1,000 people out there now exploring this, and everybody's willing to share. And I encourage you to check it out. There's a link in here somewhere to that. We also now with the 15, we've got 6 different focal lengths we can choose from. And with the Plus, with the 15 Pro Max rather, we have a 120 millimeter telephoto on this camera. That's pretty amazing. So you've got everything from a macro to a 13 millimeter ultra wide, all the way up to 120 millimeter telephoto lens. Now that's going to be different if you have the Pro versus the Max. Each of these flavors of a phone, whether it's the iPhone 15, the Plus, the Pro, or the Max, all have different features. So depending on what you have, you'll see those or not. So what amazes me is how many different types of photography we can do with one camera. As a big camera photographer, I'm used to carrying a bag with multiple lenses, with neutral density filters, with all that stuff, and it gets kind of heavy. Well, with this, I've got a little backpack or a little hip pack that's about the size of a loaf of bread, and I can carry everything I need to do all of this kind of photography: macro, portraits, landscapes, long exposures. It's just remarkable to me that we can get that much versatility out of one device that fits in our pocket. I don't shoot a lot of video, but this latest camera has taken video to a whole nother level too. One of the things that they've added here is that we can now record video in a format known as log, L-O-G. I'd never heard of it before, but basically, from what I understand, log is to video what raw is to a photo. So it's capturing more data and allows you more creative control when you're processing the video. But these are big files. Well, the nice thing with the 15 Pro Max is instead of just that Lightning port that we used to have, it now has a USB-C attachment, which means you can get a little device like the one I'm holding up here. This is a SandMark 250 gigabyte drive. You can plug that into your phone and you can record those large video files right to an external device. You can download your images to it. There's a whole lot of versatility that comes with that new USB-C port. These are the focal lengths that I was talking about. This is actually comes from the Apple site. I took their photograph that was taken by Tess Ayano. But you can see you've got a macro, and then everything from a 13, and then that's the 0.5x camera. Then there's the 1x, which is 24. If you tap on that 1x, it jumps to 28, and then it jumps to 35 if you tap it again. All that from the 24 millimeter lens. Then you go to 2x, and you get 48 millimeters and 120 for the 5x. And so I went out with this camera in the fall here. When I came home from a trip in October, my new phone was waiting for me. So I went out my neighborhood, and you can see the 13 all the way to the 120 millimeter. And I mean, you can see this really gets us close. I mean, look at the difference between, where we are here, and we're right in here on this door now, and it's clean, it's sharp, it's clear, it's a wonderful photograph. And all this is handheld, taking my walk in the morning and taking these photos. Portrait mode, which I mentioned started with the 7 Plus, is probably one of the most fun things about the iPhone, and I just love using it. And these photographs that I'm going to show you are made with a variety of iPhones over the years, so they're not all the latest and greatest. This was with the 13 Pro Max. But look at this. You can get a great sharp photo of the face of the dog, and then dial in the amount of blur you want in the background. You take the photo, and then you do all of that deciding about blur after the photo. So you don't even have to think about it at the time you're taking the photo. You can process it afterwards, and those, the data's there to manipulate. This was taken with an iPhone XS. And this is in Cuba. This is a Cuban farmer. He's making charcoal. Over his shoulder there is a fire that he's burning. I wanted to have a focus on him. His face and the character in his face was the subject here, but I wanted to show the context as well. So I let that background drop off into that soft blur. It's just one of my favorite portraits of everything I did there, and I was shooting with my big camera as well. but this iPhone photograph is a favorite. This is also with the XS Max in Cuba. And this is once you take the photo, you can also choose various light modes. And there's one called I think it's called Stage Light. And when you change to Stage Light, it drops the background out. So you end up with this a very figural image. All the noise in the background from distractions is gone. And it's just a great way to display a portrait. This photo was made this fall with the 15 Pro Max. It's one of the first photos I took with my new camera, and I love this. To me, this photo is the epitome of what this phone can do. If you look at the color and you look at how sharp this image is on this plane right here, this was portrait mode. So I dialed in some softness to this image, and I mean, handheld, all of those things. I mean, it's just amazing that we can do this with a device that fits in our pocket. Portrait mode has really grown up and improved with this 15 Pro Max. But my wife let me play with her prized Barbie doll collection recently, and this photo. What's interesting about this photo is it's the same photograph, but in editing, I chose different focal points. So one photograph, I tap here, and that first doll is in focus. Same photograph in the editor, I tap here, and now this doll is in focus. Then I tap here, and this doll is in focus. The data is there. That depth map is created for us, and then in post, in our editor, we can make these changes. I mean, that's just, I think that's mind-blowing. And this is great for people. It's great for floral photography, pets, anything you want to isolate and have the background drop off into that soft blur. Live mode is one of those tools that we've had for a long time also. Live mode is that little bullseye icon. We're going to look at that closer in a minute. It's great for getting a handheld long exposure of a waterfall, for example. Well, they've added a portrait component to live mode. So if you're in live mode, if you're taking photographs at a family gathering or whatever, and you've got several people in the frame, you can choose that portrait mode, and you can tap wherever in the frame and choose a focal point. So here, the focal point, I tapped on the face of the subject, and that's in focus. The background is soft. Well, here I tapped back here. This becomes a focal point, and the subject is soft. And then this is a final result. So the options that we have and the versatility of this, it's become very, very easy to get a high quality portrait photo. Infrared. I mentioned that I've been doing this since I started exploring how to do it with the 11 Pro Max. And infrared with the iPhone is really different from what we do with the big camera in that, you know, with our big camera, I have a Fuji X-T2 that I had converted, and they actually crack the camera open and they take out stuff, and they modify the internal workings of the camera in order to set it to a 720 nanometer light sensitivity. With the phone, we don't do any of that. Nobody's going to crack the phone open and do anything. All we do is use a filter, and I like the 720 nanometer, gives me a really rich black and white. And then you have a way of attaching that to your phone. This is an old photograph with the 11 Pro and the 12, but I've used this same setup here with the 13, the 14, and now the 15. This device clamps onto your phone, and then you screw in your infrared filter to this device. It looks, well, there's some, if you're interested in this, these links will take you out to find that filter, that filter mount, the filter. And if you already have other infrared filters, you don't need to go out and buy a brand new 67 millimeter. You can get a step down ring to fit like here's a 52 millimeter that I have. I got a very cheap $5 step down ring, and it let me use the infrared filter I already had. This is what it looks like. You you have this device here, you screw your filter into it, and it looks like this. This then attaches to your phone. You can go either over the side or over the top, and you're ready to go out and take infrared photos with your camera. There's a lot more to it than that. I mean, there are some different apps that I recommend, and there's some processing techniques that help you get the best out of the image. But it's amazing to me that we can do this. And when you see some of these photographs, I think you'll agree it's pretty cool. I took this in October with the 14 Pro Max, a 720 nanometer filter. This was in Calabria, southern Italy, the toe of the boot. And I mean, it's a beautiful, sharp, wonderful black and white. None of the foliage that infrared is known for, but that's okay. I like shooting even with a blue sky that turns black and the puffy clouds and all of that. This was taken with the 12 Pro Max using the app Camera Plus, Pro Camera and Editor. Many of us know that as Camera Plus 2. Amazing app. For this, I used the tripod. It lets me, it has a slow shutter option that lets you shoot up to 30 seconds. So this is a 30-second exposure with a 720 nanometer filter on. And again, it's doing that similar to what it does in the native camera when night mode turns on. It's taking a whole bunch of photographs during that 30-second period, and then it combines them together. And you get the softness of the movement, and then everything else is sharp, and the greenery, because of the infrared, all turns white. It's just, I think that's amazing that this is an iPhone photograph. This was out on Cape Cod, another 30-second exposure. You can see the soft water and the waterfall here, a little movement in the sky, the moving clouds. This was taken here in Indianapolis, one of my favorite little spots. This was made with a camera that's no longer available to us. The Lightroom Mobile used to have a camera called Long Exposure. Last June, they took it out for some reason. No one ever said anything why, but it's unfortunate because it was a great tool for this. But there are other ways to get this kind of photo now. But look at how it blurred the water, smoothed the surface, and then the bubbles from the waterfall created these swirls. I mean, that's just really, really cool, I think. 15 Pro Max, handheld, native camera, just walking through my neighborhood. Again, hand holding everything. All of these were taken on the same day with the 15 Pro Max. I mean, just look how clean and clear and crisp these images are. And I mean, and combine this, usually I'll process these in Lightroom Mobile. You get a raw result, you process it in Lightroom Mobile, and you can do amazing things with it. This one was a 30-second exposure with the Lightroom Mobile camera. I'm sorry, with the Camera Plus 2 camera app. And because it's 30 seconds, the clouds are moving rapidly across the sky that day. So you get those, really cool blurs of the clouds. Just another fun thing to do with that. So those are just a few examples of the infrared. The other thing that we have now that came out with the 13 Pro Max is the macro mode. In order for macro mode to work, you have to go into your settings and turn it on. And when you turn on macro mode, what it's doing is activating, it's putting a switch on your camera interface. You can then toggle between macro or not macro. By turning it on in your settings, you're putting the switch on the interface, and then you can decide if you want to use it or not. No, I'm not making crystal meth in my trailer in the backyard. This is table salt. I wanted to show you this. This is the 1X on the 15 Pro. This is the macro mode. It's not a great photo, but it's not because the camera can't do it. It's because I didn't do a good job making this photo. And I wanted to show you this because a lot of people I know have used the macro mode and they get discouraged because they're getting shots like this that aren't clean and sharp. But it really requires you to get the right distance of closeness to the subject. And I find that if using a tripod allows me to keep that camera really steady and still get really close. And I do get good results when I do that. Here's an example of 1X. These are just raisins, you know, the size of the end of your finger. And here's with the macro mode getting closer. This I wanted to show you. This is the 1X with the 15 Pro Max. This is the macro mode on the 15 Pro Max. Very clean and sharp of my little fish, cast iron fish that I have on my desk. And then this, I wanted to show you this because this is another great macro alternative. Camera Plus again. It has a macro mode built into it, and it's phenomenal. I mean, you can get really close to things, get really good quality photos. It will not produce a raw macro photo though. So if that's something that is a requirement, that you won't be able to get that. But I'm getting good results with that tool. I mentioned earlier the idea of night mode, and we'll look at that in the camera a minute. Again, it's activated when the camera senses that it's dark enough, and then it will fire for a period of seconds. Macro or night mode will let you hand hold up to 10 seconds. After 10 seconds, the gyroscope knows that you're hand holding it, and it won't let the camera photograph for any longer than 10 seconds. So even if you're in a really dark setting, trying to shoot the night sky or something, it won't let you hand hold it past 10 seconds. But put it on the tripod, and you can get up to 30-second exposures with night mode. This photograph, by the way, I was fortunate to have an article in the PSA Journal in January, and this photo from Havana was featured on the cover. So that was really fun to see that. So thanks to the folks at PSA. Just a word about RAW. I'm gonna assume that many of you shooting with a big camera that you appreciate the value of shooting in RAW. There's more data. I mean, basically, the sensor records everything that the camera sees without compressing it. We can now do that with our iPhone from the 13 on, or I guess the 12 on. We can now do Pro RAW within the camera, but then there are also other tools. I encourage you to try it out. You'll have a little bit more data to work with when you're processing. You can often recover details from bright skies or dark shadows that you might not be able to recover from a JPEG or a HEIF file. If you print, I think you'll be pleased with the quality of a RAW photo that you process for printing. RAW files do require some processing. They don't always look great right out of the camera. The data is there, but nothing's been done to that yet. And so you get to make the decisions about how you're going to manage the color and the brightness and all of those things. I think it's worth it, but you be the judge and try it yourself. Keep in mind, these RAW files can be 3 times as large as a JPEG or even a HEIF file. So you can get up to 75 megabyte RAW files. And so that's something you have to manage if you have smaller storage space on your phone or whatever. So just keep that in mind. If you're interested in learning more about that, there's a webinar that I've got out there that you can check out through that link. A few other things to consider. Consider trying this HEIC or HEIF file format. As I mentioned before, it's has more data. The file size is smaller, so it's great for file storage. And I like the results that I'm getting. With the 15 now, you can actually set it to produce a 48 megapixel file. If you have the 12 or later, turn on Pro RAW. Pro RAW, by turning it on in your settings, just puts a button on your interface, on your camera. It doesn't mean you're going to shoot RAW all the time. It means that you have the option of a button to turn it on and off on your interface. So you want to turn that on in your settings, and then you can decide when you shoot RAW and when you don't. With the 14 and 15, you can bump your Pro RAW resolution up to 48 megapixels. I encourage you to do that and try it. See what the results that you're getting. And then if you have an iPhone that's before the 13, you'll have a setting in your settings called Smart HDR. Turn that on. On the later phones, it's just built into the phones. It's there. Smart HDR is going to help you get a balanced exposure when you have a high contrast image, like a really bright sky and a dark mountain range. It's going to be able to address the brightness of the sky and the darkness of the mountain range. And then if you're turning on lens correction in your settings, I recommend that because with all these lenses that we have now, the ability to correct some distortion that's bound to happen with those is a good thing. And then with the macro mode, which came out with the 13, again, you want to go into your settings and turn macro mode on. All that does is put a switch on your camera interface, and you can then decide when you want to shoot macro and when you don't. This becomes important if you're shooting infrared. Because you have a filter over your lenses, you want to make sure that macro mode is off when you're shooting infrared. Otherwise, the camera can get confused and try and focus on that filter on your camera and make it hard to get to focus on the subject. So that can be important for infrared, but just have it turned on so you can decide when you want to shoot and when you don't. Some of this stuff, quick camera access, some things like that, we'll look at in a minute. Pinching and zooming is so tempting to take two fingers and zoom in with your phone. But when you do that, know that you're degrading the quality of the image. You're switching from an optical zoom, which is a good zoom, using the glass in the camera, to a digital zoom, which is basically just blowing everything up, just like it would be if you tried to blow up a picture you were going to print. It doesn't look very good if you exceed the limits of that image. So we'll look at that on the screen too. There's a way to take a video and shoot still photographs at the same time. And I'll show you that when we get into the camera. One last thing here I want to mention about these smaller photos. Our iPhone has a smaller sensor than our big cameras, and the photos are going to be, they're produced on that smaller sensor, so quality can become an issue. There is a tool for the desktop by Topaz, company called Topaz. It's called Photo AI, and it has 3 tools built into it. One is to reduce noise, one is to sharpen, and the other is to increase the resolution of the image. This stuff is magic to me. I can't explain exactly how it works, but I can tell you the results will blow your mind. So if you have an iPhone image that's on the smaller side and that you want to print, I mean, I've printed up to 80 inches on the long edge. If you have something like that, but maybe you've cropped the photo and done other things to reduce its resolution, use this tool and you will be amazed at the quality that you're getting. And you can do a 30-day trial with it or whatever, but I do recommend it. The next few slides, excuse me, not going to go through these. What I've done is captured screenshots from different phones. So whatever phone you have, you might be able to find it here. I've done everything from the 10, the 10S, the 11, the 12, the 13, the 14, and the 15. So we're not going to go through all of these right now, just too much, don't have the time for it, but you can go back and look at these slides later and take a look at those settings and see if you want to try some of those things that I've used on my cameras over the years. The rest of this are just some other resources that you might find useful. A couple of iPhone brackets if you get into using the tripod, a couple of tripods that I like, other resources, my newsletter. I've got a YouTube channel with stuff. Here's that infrared Facebook page I mentioned. Anyway, take a look at all of that. And then I've got some video recordings available on different subjects that you can check out. And then also, if you enjoy doing workshops, I've got a couple of things coming up. I've got my February dance workshop in Cuba is full, but I'm doing another one with Ramses Batista in November. And then I have a couple spaces left in Cape Cod in April. That's coming up real quick. And I just had a cancellation. I have one spot in Tuscany, May 1 to 8, and one spot in the Palouse just opened up due to a cancellation. So anyway, you can look at all that on your own. I'm going to stop there. And what I want to do is switch over to my iPhone. So I am going to stop sharing that and share my phone. There we go. Come on. Gotta see my face. There we go. So what I'd like to do is just open up the iPhone, the native camera, and walk through some of these features and share with you some thoughts about what I do to get the best quality I can get from the native camera. The native camera on the iPhone, it didn't used to be very good. Nobody used it. I mean, everybody used a different camera app back in the day. Now, ever since about the 11 or 12, it's gotten very good, and it's very capable of doing lots of things now. So what I'm going to do, it's the native camera. It's this one, the one that comes with your phone, and I'm just going to tap and go out to it. And I'm pointing my camera here at my little desktop next to the computer, and got some things here that we can use for demonstrations here. So what I want to do is just quickly go through some of these features and point out a few things about them. So first of all, you'll notice up here in the upper left is the flash icon. You notice I have it turned off. There's a line through it. I don't use the flash very often for anything I care about. It's one harsh blast that you can't regulate, and it's also on the camera pointing directly at the subject. It's not really a good angle for a portrait, so I rarely use it. Not saying you shouldn't use it. Try it. You may find opportunities to use it in low light or whatever, but for anything of high quality, I don't usually use it. The next thing that you see up here is an exposure dial. Right now it's set to minus 0.3. This is a button, and if you tap on this, I'm going to tap on it on the phone, and it brings up an exposure dial down here. You can dial down, darken it by 2 stops. So then I can bring it back up to 0, and then I can brighten it by 2 stops. So this is a great way to manage your exposure, and it works in combination with the other mechanism, which is when you tap on the screen. So I'm going to tap up here on the screen. You notice that it puts a yellow box where I tapped, and next to that box, you see there's a little sun. Well, that sun, and you don't have to put your finger on the sun. You can put your finger anywhere on the screen. What I'm going to do is tap to focus, and then I'm going to drag my finger down, and see how the sun is going. I can darken or brighten my exposure. And this works in conjunction with this dial, so you can kind of manage your exposure when you're setting up your shot. One other thing that isn't showing up here right now is night mode. So watch what happens. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to turn off my lights. And now it's very dark in here. The only light is coming from a small light on my computer for the video and my computer. Notice when it got dark, this capsule appeared. What's happening is the camera sensed how dark it got, and it activated night mode. And so it's telling me that it's dark enough under these circumstances that it wants to photograph for 3 seconds. Not a 3-second exposure where it's just going to absorb all that light for 3 seconds. It's going to take a whole bunch of photographs for a 3-second period, and then it's going to stack those together. So if I switch to the 2x lens, and I'm just going to come in here, drop that down. It's really low light, and I'll go ahead and take the shot. And it switched to a 1-second exposure when I dropped the light down. But let's just go take a look at it. And so there's our shot. I mean, that's considering it's pretty much almost dark in here. That's pretty nice. So I wanted to show you that. Again, you can handhold this up to 10 seconds. If it's dark enough to warrant longer than 10 seconds, you have to have it on a tripod, or it won't function after 10 seconds. It won't let you handhold it. I don't have any examples to show you, but I've seen some remarkable night photography and star photography, star trails and things like that, using this tool on a tripod. All right, I'm going to turn my lights back on and watch. As soon as I gets bright again, that capsule goes away because the camera's sensing that it doesn't need night mode anymore. So the next thing I wanted to mention here, down below, these are with the 15, I have an ultra wide 13 millimeter. I have a 24 millimeter 1X. I have a 48 millimeter 2X and a 120 millimeter 5X lens or camera. So as long as I choose any of these, tapping on any of these choices, I'm staying within a optical zoom, which is a good quality zoom. So if I tap on the 5, you can see how close I can get. That's going to give me a good quality image. However, if I were to take 2 fingers and zoom in like that, I have suddenly switched from optical zoom, which is going to give me a good quality zoom, to a digital zoom, which is going to give me less quality in my image when I go to print it or work with it. So keep that in mind. Try and use the designated lenses that you have, or zoom with your feet. Walk closer if you need to, rather than pinching and zooming. Not that you should never do that, but just know that if you do, you're degrading the quality of your image. And you can use something like Photo AI to recover an image like that, and it will do a remarkable job, but it's just one more step that you would have to go through. The other thing that you can do here, we mentioned earlier, tapping for focus. If you don't tap and tell it where to focus and where to get a light reading, it'll decide for you. When you tap, if you wanted to lock in on that and lock the exposure and focal point, you can take your finger and hold it on the screen. See how it jiggles? And now the auto exposure and auto focus is locked. So what that means is, let's say you're taking pictures of kids at the beach and you're sitting up in your lawn chair on the beach and they're running along the shoreline. Well, they're the same distance, the light's the same. You can lock your exposure on that and then just move your camera around, take all pictures all day. The camera doesn't have to constantly recalculate the exposure. So it just is a quick way to maintain your exposure when you're shooting. All right, the next thing up here, notice that it's showing me that I have I have RAW max. So I have my camera set to shoot a RAW file in the maximum 48 megapixels. The reason that I have this button here is because I went out into my settings and turned it on there. So that's something that you'll want to do. If you have the 12 or later, I believe that's when RAW first came out, you want to go into your camera settings and turn it on there. And with the 15 Pro Max, you have some options that don't exist in the earlier cameras. You can have not only a RAW max 48 megapixel, but you could also have a RAW 12 megapixel file. So you get some of the benefits of RAW, but in a smaller package. One of the things that's kind of cool with the 15, you can switch to those other options without going back to the camera, without going back to the settings icon. What I'm going to do, watch if I wanted to turn off RAW, I would simply tap on it and it puts a line through it. So now it's going to default to JPEG or HEIF, whichever I chose as my default image format. If I tap on it again, it turns it back on. Watch this. If I do a long press on RAW Max, look at that. It pops up a menu and I can quickly change from a 48 megapixel RAW to a 12 megapixel RAW or a 48 megapixel HEIF file. So it's just a very convenient way in the 15 only to choose those settings. So the next thing that we have over here is live mode. Live mode is that tool that lets us take a long exposure of something like a waterfall or a moving stream. And when it first came out, kind of drove me crazy. And I think it did a lot of people. It's like you go into your camera roll and you'd see these images moving. And it was like, what happened? Well, you would usually end up taking them by accident. Well, the thing about it is they are really good if you are intentional about it. When I tap on, right now it's off. The line is through it. It's deactivated. But if I tap on it, watch what happens to RAW when I tap on live mode. It turns off RAW. Live mode is on, but you cannot get a RAW result in live mode. So that is one of the things to be aware of. What's going to happen now when I take this photograph, what I'm going to do here, I've got this little fountain here on my desktop. And I'm just going to leave it on 5x here. And I'm going to tap for focus. And I might bring my exposure down a little bit for a little drama. And I've selected live mode. The only way you can tell live mode is on is that the bullseye is there and there's no line through it. There's no other way that tells you that live mode is on. I'm going to tap the shutter button and watch the screen. It flashes live up at the top. It tells me it just took a live photo. Now, when I go into the image, either in the camera roll or right here, it tells me that it was made, it's a live photo. Well, if this is a button, so if I tap on that button, I can now come down and choose any of these things. I could choose loop. If I choose loop, it's just going to run continuously. I don't know what that's good for, but you might find use for it. What's really cool is the long exposure. So I'm going to tap long exposure and come on. And now look what it's done. Anything moving, the water in this case, has become soft and creamy, whereas everything else is sharp in the image. So, I mean, this is a pretty undramatic waterfall that I have here, but let's go look at some actual examples of what this looks like. So here are some images where I've used, and this was done with, what is this? Let's see. This was the XS Max. So this works with earlier phones as well. This was taken with the live mode on, just a little spillway. And if I come up here and tap live and choose long exposure, I get that. I mean, that's gorgeous. I mean, I find it amazing. Here's another one. This is a pier out on Cape Cod. Choose live, tap long exposure, and I get this ethereal looking dreamlike movement of the water. Just a couple more. Here's one. This one is from down in Kentucky. I forget the name of the waterfall, Cumberland Falls. Look at that. I mean, pretty remarkable handheld result with the iPhone. Now, here's one too. This one's already been processed, so I can't do the live mode, but this was taken out in the Palouse. This is Palouse Falls 2 years ago when it was record flow. This is handheld with live mode in the iPhone. Probably this would have been 2 years ago. It's probably the 12 or 13. I mean, that's a pretty amazing result for what, people often say is just an iPhone. So that's live mode. And the other thing that I wanted to show you here, again, there's just so many little things that you can do with this. One of the other things that I want to show you is doing a burst. You can do a burst of photos that it takes a lot of photos very quickly. Well, when would you want to do a burst? Well, maybe you're playing with your dog and you want it to you want to throw the Frisbee and have that shot of him leaping in the air and catching the Frisbee in his mouth. Well, the likelihood of you timing that shot just right is not very good. Maybe you're trying to get the volleyball player spiking the ball at the top of the net. Again, not going to be able to time that very well. But if you do a burst, you can have a bunch of photos to choose from. So in order to do a burst on the earlier phones, and I can't remember exactly where they made the switch, on the earlier phones, you simply held the shutter button down and it would fire until you lifted your finger off. On the newer phones, you take your finger and watch what I'm going to do with the shutter button. I'm going to drag it to the left and hold on to it. I just took about 44 or 45 photos in that short period of time. If I go and tap on the photo, it tells me it's a burst of 44 photos. I can go down here to select, open it up, and here are all those photos. Now there's no motion happening in this, so it's kind of boring. There's nothing to choose from. But let's go look at some examples here. And bear with me a second. There's no quick way to do this. I just have to scroll through here to get to it. Let's see. When you copy, if you try to copy a stack to put it in another album or something, you can't do it because it won't take all the photos. So that's why I have to scroll through here and find what I'm looking for. And I know this is really boring. Oh, come on. Here we go. So here's the image. So this is a dancer in Cuba. He's a contemporary dancer and he's about to do a leap. And I wanted to catch him at the top of his leap, which is pretty spectacular, by the way. So what I did was a burst of photos. You can see up here, it tells me there are 21 photos in this burst. So if I come down here and choose select, now I can scroll through here and find the one where he's at the top. It's like the old flip books we had as kids. You can see, I can just page through it. There's the one where he is at the apex of his jump. I just tap to select it, and now I can separate that from the pile and I can work with that image. It will ask you if you want to save just that image or if you want to separate this one and keep all of them there. I typically keep them all, but that's a choice you can make depending on storage. But that's how that works. It's a really useful tool for certain things when you're trying to, capture a moment. Another thing that I wanted to show you here that you can do, and then we'll move on. You can take a video and shoot stills at the same time. So you could go over here and shoot and select your video camera, but what I'm going to do instead, I'm in the photo mode. What I'm going to do is take the shutter button and drag it to the right. So watch what happens. I'm going to drag it to the right, and now you can tell the video is running. You can see the counter going at the top. So it's taking a video of what's going on here, and I can go in here and I can move around, and I can come here, and when I want to take a still, I'm going to tap the shutter button, the white shutter button. And every time I tap it, it's taking a photo. So now I'm going to tap the red button to stop the video. And now if I go out to the camera roll, there's my video. And here are the stills that I took while the video was running. I mean, that's pretty amazing. Now, one thing to keep in mind, let's look at one of those videos, or one of those stills rather. Notice it's only 10 megapixels. So it's not, it is a lesser quality, but it's still pretty daggone good. I mean, 10 megapixels, you can do a lot with. And it's also defaulting to JPEG. It's not going to give you a raw file. But that's just another little thing that is pretty cool to do. All right. Trying to think what I got. So we're about an hour. Let me see here. Well, so those are things. Oh, I'm not done. What am I thinking of? Let's go back here to the camera. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about here in these options that we have, there are two others. One is portrait mode and one is pano. And portrait mode, I want to show you this because again, I just think this is one of the most fun things about the iPhone is being able to use this portrait mode. Notice right now I have selected portrait mode, and I've also selected the 5x lens, but I could also choose the 1x or the 2x by choosing here. I'm going to choose the 5x, and notice if I get too close to the subject, notice how it tells me at the top, move farther away. And down below my light mode, it's not active, it's grayed out. You want to make sure when you choose to do a portrait mode, you sometimes have to move until you get the subject, you get far enough away from the subject that it will activate. So notice, as soon as I backed away, the studio light it turned yellow. That is my indication that portrait mode has been activated and we're going to get a good result. So a couple of things. A lot of times you can set your settings before you take a portrait, but you don't have to. If you go up here, you'll notice it says f16. So there's no aperture on our iPhone. There's no physical aperture like there is on a camera that you can, that you can open and close. It's all simulated. What this is doing is telling me right now it's set to an f-stop of f16. Now, because we're in the 120 millimeter telephoto right now, and we're focused on the elephant, the background is really blurred. If I were to switch to something lesser than that, I'd get a little bit more. Well, let's just do it. Let's go to 2x. And so now I can focus on the elephant. There's a little bit of blur. Whoops, now it's telling me to move farther away. There we go. So now it's active. The elephant's in focus. It's a little bit soft back here, even though we're still at f16. I don't have to change this right now. I could go up and tap on f16, and I could dial down the f-stop, or actually open the f-stop by dialing this down. And now look at 1.4. Look at that blur now. Well, what I like to do, you don't have to do this before you make the photo. Get your photo set up, make sure that you're activated here. Don't worry about which light setting you choose, and don't worry about your f-stop setting. Just frame your photo, make sure you're focused on your subject, and take your shot. So that's what I'm going to do. So now, when we go and look at the photo, it tells us it's a portrait mode. Well, to edit that, we're going to use the iOS editor right here. Tap on edit, and it takes us into the portrait editor within the iOS editor. So this is the edit button that's in your camera roll, but if it's a portrait mode photo, it's going to open it in this portrait editor. Notice if you tap on the F, like it's active here, you have your depth dial. Right now, it's at f16. You can also turn it off by sliding all the way to the left. But if I slide to the right, look at how as I open the aperture, I can go down, all the way to 1.4. But this is the cool thing. So there's our image, and it's focused right here. But let's say I really want to focus on this object back here. All I have to do is tap over here, and now I've shifted the focus to that other thing. So when you take the photo, it creates this depth map, and then you can navigate that depth map to decide what focal point you want. So I'm going to go back here to the elephant. The other thing you can do is choose a lighting option. So by tapping on this icon up here in the upper left, now I can come down here, and these are all my lighting options. And all I have to do is drag along there. There's natural light, studio light, contour light, and there's stage light. Stage light is going to spotlight the subject. Now, in this case, it's spotlighted it to the point where it's only left a little bit there, and maybe that's what you want. But if I were to go up to my f-stop again, tap on that, I can come down here and I can open that up by sliding a little bit here. So I can add a little bit more of the spotlight. Really cool effect. You remember the woman, the Cuban woman with the flowers? That's what I used for that. Changed it to that, forgot what it's called, stage light, and it spotlights the subject. Very cool. And the thing to remember again, back out of this and go back to the camera, you don't have to set all this up at the time you make the photo. take the photo, then go into your editor and make those blur selections and light selections after the fact. All right. Last thing here, and then we'll take a look at a little bit quick look at some processing. So the other tool that I love within the native camera, go back to photo, and that's the pano mode. Oops, I'm switched to portrait mode. I meant to go to pano over here. So the pano mode, it's wonderful for landscapes. It's also great for interiors, and I'll show you what I mean in a minute. It's a pretty simple concept. Basically, it's telling you to move the phone continuously and keep the arrow on the yellow line. So and you can choose any of the focal lengths you want. So let's do this with a 2x. So I'm going to move my water bottle out of the way here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to come over here and I'm going to frame my image. Now, when you're framing your image, notice there's this little thumbnail in here. Well, the top of the thumbnail is the top of your frame here. The bottom of the thumbnail is the bottom of your frame here. So you don't have to worry about squinting to look at that little thumbnail. Just look at your whole screen and frame your shot. So get it where you want it. When you're ready to take the photo, you're going to tap on the shutter button. You don't have to hold it. Just tap it and release it. And then move to the right. Notice it's telling me to slow down. That's because we're in a relatively low light situation and it wants me to go very slow. So there's the photograph that I just took in portrait mode. A couple of things that you can do. Let's say you wanted to start instead of from the left, you wanted to start from the right for some reason, maybe so you could line up your shot with the edge of something. So you just tap on the opposite side of the screen and you can change the direction that you're going to move. So now I'm going to start on this side, tap pano, and I'm going to slide to the left. And there is our, whoops. Well, I screwed it up because I didn't do it right. So let's just do that one more time. And when I get to the end and I want to stop, I just reverse motion. You don't have to tap the button again. I just reverse motion and it stops. So there's our portrait mode. The other thing you can do is take the phone and turn it in a horizontal orientation, and you can move up this way with your phone. So what that would look like is if we go back to and I'm going to tap the shutter and I'm just going to scroll up. And when I'm done, I can either tap the shutter button or reverse motion. And now I've done a vertical pano. So let's go look at some real life examples of when this is really cool to do. So go back to, so here are some of the images that I've done using this pano mode. So this is a church in Ohio. It's one of the only places in the country that has curved pews like this. No, totally kidding. That's distortion from the panel or the pano. It's a barrel distortion that occurs. The closer you are to the subject, the more of that barrel distortion that you get. I like it sometimes. If the further you are, the less of that you get. This is a vertical pano. This is done in the Palouse. I wanted to show that long winding road and that incredible sky. The only way I could do that in one photo was to do a pano. Here's another. This is in Tropea on the Tyrrhenian coast of southern Italy in the toe of the boot. Beautiful stretch of buildings. I couldn't have done this with a wide angle. The pano let me do this. And by the way, if you zoom in on this, the quality of these panos, come on. The quality of these panos is remarkable. I mean, I don't know if you can, I hope that's translating through Zoom. You can, I've printed this up to 80 inches, a little bit more than 80 inches on that long edge, and it looks fabulous. Um, Another one from Southern Italy. One of the things that you want to do when you do a landscape pano, or anywhere, find the brightest spot in the image and lock your exposure on that spot, and then do your pano. That way, it won't constantly throughout the pano keep readjusting for the exposure. And it will, if you don't do that, you can get some lines in your image that ruin the photograph. What'll happen is it'll be exposed well for the clouds. The building may look too dark, but it's a simple fix to lift that exposure in Snapseed. Here's another, this is a church in Cosenza, Italy. A couple other panos. You get the idea. This was in Italy. I love the lyrical nature of this, and I processed it with some stylization and textures and so on. So those are some examples. This is with the ultra wide angle lens, so you can get some really strange looking images that way. A couple, this is another of that same church with a different the ultra wide angle lens. So it's just a really fun, another fun thing to do with that native camera. So in the last couple minutes here before we stop and take some questions, I want to talk a little bit about processing. So I mentioned earlier that if you shoot RAW, you have to process those files. Typically, they don't always look great right out of the camera. Sometimes they do, but what I like to do, there's several different tools that I like to use for processing a RAW file. If all you have is the apps that come with the camera and you don't have any other external apps, the editor in the iPhone, the iOS editor, the one that the button you see in the camera roll, is an excellent RAW editor. It doesn't have a histogram and it doesn't have the ability to do any masking, so you can't selectively work with a part of an image, but it's still a very good tool. What I often like to do is a combination of editing the RAW file first in the native iOS editor, and then take it into Snapseed for some finishing touches. So why do I do that? Well, first of all, Snapseed will take a RAW file, but it's a really crummy RAW editor. It's very kludgy. It's you can get there, but it's not fun. So what I prefer to do is milk the goodness out of the RAW file using the native editor, and then take it into Snapseed for some fine tuning. So let's just take a look. Let's go find an image here. And let's see. Let's grab this one right here. So this is a photograph, and let's see what it was made with. This was made with the 13 Pro Max. This is the Palouse out in Eastern Washington. Beautiful region. Going to be doing 2 workshops there this spring and have an opening in one of them. So if anybody wants to join me. It's a great time. Notice this is a RAW file. It's telling me up here it's a RAW file. So I want to do some editing with it. So what I'm going to do is tap on the edit button here. When I do, I'm in the iOS editor, and these are my adjustments that I can do. And what I'm going to do here is tap on the automatic adjustment button. That's the first thing I'm going to do. Tap on it. Notice notice what happened. If I hold my finger down, there's before and there's after. Now I can tell already it's oversaturated it to my taste, but it did make a bunch of changes that I'm gonna go with. It's a starting point. Now I can scroll through here. I could adjust the exposure, but I don't believe it requires that. Next thing, I've got something called Brilliance. I've never seen Brilliance in any other editor. It's similar to Ambiance in Snapseed as near as I can tell. But watch how it affects the image when I drag, if I bring that up. See how it's affecting, excuse me, it affects the contrast and the saturation and the brightness. So again, I'm going to find a sweet spot that looks good to me. And you can zoom in if you want and play with that. Next is highlights. This is like a brightness slider for the highlighted or the bright areas in the image. if I drop my highlights down, I can add drama to that sky. If I bring my highlights up, I can go way too far and blow them out. So again, you're kind of looking for a sweet spot here. I kind of like to drop that highlights down a little bit and add some drama. Next is shadows. Same thing, it's a brightness slider for the shadows. If I go this way, I've over brightened my shadows. But if I go this way, I can find a spot there that gives me just a little bit of drama, but still keeps the amount of detail I want. Next is contrast. I rarely mess with this, but it a little goes a long way. If you bring it up, you can see how it really makes it harsh. If you go the other way, it washes things out. So you want to have that auto adjustment's pretty good about right there. Next is brightness. You could brighten this up or darken it. I'm going to leave it what the auto setting did. And then you have black point. And if you increase the black point, you're darkening the image. See how it's darkening those? It's very similar to shadows, but it's a little different. Again, I'm looking for that spot that gives me the contrast that I want visually. Next, we have saturation. I'm going to drop the saturation here because I think it oversaturated it in the auto. Looks a little bit better. And also the vibrance, I'm going to drop that down in this case, which is really rare for me because usually I want to oversaturate, but I think that looks a lot better. Then you have warmth. You could warm this image up a little bit and bring out some of those yellow tones. But again, that's a judgment call. I don't usually mess with tint. Sharpness, I can come in here and again, I can zoom in and watch what's going on. A little sharpening goes a long way. I rarely go over about 20. And you can watch what's happening. And then definition, I'm going to bring up the definition, and it really brings out some of the clarity. It kind of clarifies the details in those trees. There's also a noise reduction tool, which I don't like and don't use here. It has a tendency to smooth out the whole image and make it cartoonish. And I don't want to do that. And I don't really like the vignette tool. So at this point, there's our image. There's where we started, and there's where we are now. So it's a little more saturated, it's a little sharper, all of those things. Notice up here, I've got a done button, and I'm going to say done and back out of that. So here's what's interesting, and this is really confusing, I think. It still tells us it's a raw file. Well, it is in the sense that I can go back up here to the edit button. I can revert this back to its original raw format. But because it's edited already, I'm going to cancel back out of here. It's already been edited, even though it says it's a raw file here. If I move this into Snapseed, it doesn't go in as a raw file. It goes in as a JPEG. So it doesn't activate Snapseed's develop mode, which I don't like. So it's really kind of a funny thing. The only way you can know if the file's been edited is to open it, and you'll see a revert button, and that tells you it's been edited. And you could revert it to the original, but I'm not going to. What I'm going to do instead, I'm going to move this image into Snapseed and do some fine tuning. So I'm going to come down here to the share icon, tap on that, and I am going to copy that photo to a clipboard. So I've just copied it to a clipboard. Now I want to move it into Snapseed. Well, the way I'm going to do that, it's a shortcut. I'm going to come up here to the Snapseed icon, but instead of tapping to open it, I'm going to hold my finger down on it, and I get a menu. One of the things I can do is paste that image into Snapseed. So I'm going to tap paste, and it's telling me, oh, hey, you were working on another image earlier, but you didn't save it. I'm going to say, that's okay. I don't need to. Just open the new image. So there's the new photograph. So now what I'm going to do is go through a process that I do in Snapseed and share that with you. It's something I use on, you can use it on just about any file. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my tools right here where the pencil is. That's my tool, my toolbox. I'm going to go to Tune Image up in the upper left, and Tune Image, I can slide my finger up on the screen, and these are all the things I can adjust. I'm going to start with ambiance. I'm going to take my finger and drag to the right. Notice how I'm changing. See how the image changes? I'm going back and forth. Look at that. I'm lifting the shadows a little bit with ambiance. That's tremendous. There's before and there's after. I've opened up the shadows in those trees just a little bit. Next, I can go down to highlights and I can either brighten my sky, but see, that's too much. See, I've blown out parts, but watch, I'm going to drop down and I could even go into the negative and add a little drama in the sky. There's before and there's after. Now I can go to shadows. And if I wanted to, I could lift the shadows in the trees, or I could drop that down a little bit and add a little more drama in the tree line. So there's before and there's after. And you can play with that. This is where you get to exercise your creative judgment on what you want to do with this. This is where it gets really fun. The last thing here is warmth. If you go to the right, you can warm the image up. If you go to the left, you can cool it off. Again, a little bit of warmth maybe might be good here. Bring out some of those yellows in the grasses and the hillside. There's our image. Now I'm going to hit the check mark and commit to those changes. There's a bunch of things we could do. What I might do is go in here. I might choose HDR. Tap on that and see what it's done. There's before and there's after, and then I might drop that down. Pardon me. I need to get a drink here. So lots of different creative opportunities here. So I'm going to go ahead and commit to that. I kind of like that, what it does, give it a little bit of a bite to it. I like. Next, I'm going to go up to my details right here. And I'm going to, in details, you can adjust structure and sharpening. What I want to do is adjust the structure in the foreground. And so I'm going to bring my structure up to maybe, I don't know, 30 or so. And you can zoom in and watch as this is happening. And you can press on the screen. There's before and after. It's pretty subtle. Might bring it up a little bit more just for the sake of the example. Before and after. And then do a little sharpening. Oops. I don't want to go that much. Let's see. What did I do? Oh, my structure. That's why I wasn't seeing it. I wasn't doing it. Okay, so let's go up to about 35 or so before and after. So it's just really given us some definition in those trees. Now, what it's done too, though, look at how it started to add a little noise in the sky, which I don't want. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to commit to the changes in structure and sharpening. So now I have globally sharpened and added structure to the whole image. What I'm going to do now is go up here to the history. And what I want to do is create a mask. So I'm going to go to view edits. And what I want to do is apply the sharpening only to the trees and the grasses, not to the sky. So to do that, I'm going to come into details. I'm going to tap on that layer, that adjustment layer. I could throw it away. I could go back into the details and tweak those adjustments, or I could choose the brush. Now, when I tap the brush, watch the image. Well, you may not be able to see much, but I'm going to choose the brush. What we're seeing now, we're in the masking mode here, and we're seeing the image, but without that last sharpening and structure applied. Snapseed's waiting for me to tell it where to put that sharpening and structure. And it's down here, it's telling me it's going to apply 100% wherever I tell it to. I'm going to click over here to make sure this eyeball is blue. And then I'm going to take my finger and I'm going to paint in on this area of the image. And I'm basically telling Snapseed, put that structure in this part of the image, but leave the sky alone. Leave it creamy and smooth. I'm going to commit to that. And now there's our image with our sky still creamy, but the trees and the foreground all sharpened and add structure to it. The next thing I'm going to do here, and this is again a preference for me, I'm noticing that there's a little bit of stuff over here on the edge of this frame. So I don't usually like to crop iPhone images because I don't want to give up those pixels and make it smaller. But in this case, I'm going to. So I'm going to go up to the crop tool and I am going to choose a 5:4 crop. So the default is 4:3, but I'm going to choose 5:4 and just slide this over. And now see, I've kind of cut that area, that little edge out, and I want to kind of leave space here, but I've cut this little distraction out of the frame. So now there's our image. there's before, and there's after. Last thing I'm going to do is add a vignette. There is a vignette tool, but I prefer using the Vintage tool. And here's what happens. Vintage has a whole bunch of different filters you can apply. Number 12, though, doesn't really add any color. It only adds darkness in a vignette. And if I slide up and down, I can see that the vignette is 30%. That's a lot of vignette. I'm going to drop that down to maybe 10. There's before and there's after. Then I'm going to go up to my brightness here, and I'm just going to brighten the image a little bit. And now there's our image where we started with it and where we ended. And I'm going to go ahead and save that. I'm going to go to the share icon down here. And when I save from Snapseed, I save a copy. You can save changes here. It saves the original image, and you can always undo it. You can export, which saves everything, but it collapses all the layers. So you can't reopen the file in Snapseed and edit those layers anymore. If you save a copy, which is what I'm going to do, it's going to save all of those adjustment layers. And if you open this in Snapseed again, you can edit those of those layers and work with them. So let's just go look at the camera roll. Take a look at that photo. There it is. And there's our image of that landscape. That's pretty nice. Again, iPhone 13 Pro Max. So that's probably a good place to stop. I kind of went a little longer than I intended, but hopefully we can still get to the questions that you have. So, Rich, I don't know how you want to proceed here with questions, but I'll kind of leave it to you.
Brad, that was an unbelievable amount of information. I have a 15 Pro, and now I'm anxious to get into it and really learn what it can do. I think only knew the surface. So with regards to questions, maybe the best way to do it is if you do have a question, could you raise your, do you know how to, at the bottom of your screen, you can raise your hand. And if you do that, I can see your hand is raised that you have a question. And you can unmute yourself and ask Rad anything you like.
I don't see the handout.
Yeah, I don't see it either. If you do have a question, though, go ahead and ask it.
So, Rich, I have a question for Rad. This is Joel.
Hi, Joel.
Hi, Joel.
On my iPhone 15 Pro, I don't see this exposure thing up at the top that he had. Is there a switch that turns it on and off?
Let me see here. Let me go back to take a look at that. There is. So you don't see this.
No, not at all.
So
I see everything
in,
else.
okay,
No.
go into the little caret and go down to down here. The same thing can be achieved down here. So if I tap on that, it brings
That does it.
it
Yep.
brings that up.
Yeah,
Now,
thank you.
yeah.
All right.
That's all. That's all I needed. Thanks.
Okay, good.
Next question. Just say your name and what your question is. But first, yeah, unmute yourself first.
Karen Kosmala. Will all this stuff, pardon me, I have a cold. Will all this information you gave us that's recorded, will it all be on there like it is now?
Yes,
Hope you can
yes, it'll be
understand.
everything we listen to.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and Karen, I'm also going to give you a copy of my slides. Someone else asked about if there's a handout. It's basically the presentation. I'll share that with you, and it has links to some of the resources, accessories, things like that that I mentioned.
Other questions? Just unmute yourself and go ahead.
Linda Koski's got one.
Go ahead, Linda.
Hi, Rich, and thank you, Brad.
Hi, Lena.
This question pertains more to Camera Club rules, and I do have Snapseed. I haven't used it much, so it was interesting to learn a little bit more. But some of these apps do all the watercolor, the infrared, all this other stuff. Is that something that we're supposed to allow in our pictures that we enter?
Yeah, it's a great question and one the board has tackled recently. We sent out some information with regards to using quote unquote AI, but for things like creative and pictorial, it's pretty wide open, except for using AI, especially prompting, text prompts AI. That's forbidden in almost everything we do. But using those types of tools is okay.
All right.
Well, and Linda, I'd add to that, if you're doing infrared, it's really not different than doing infrared with a big camera. I mean, technically it's different, but you're not using a filter. It's not like an app where you click a button and it changes it to infrared. It's not what we're doing here. We're actually using an infrared filter to create that infrared image, and then you're processing it the way you would an infrared image taken with a big camera. So I don't know how that would be anything that would be out of bounds. The other thing is, I know some clubs, you can get textures now. You can buy texture packs. A lot of the apps have textures that you can add, and some clubs don't want you using textures that you didn't create yourself. Well, there are some apps. There's one called Distressed FX, and it comes with a whole bunch of textures and filters, but it also has an option where you can add your own. So you can create your own filters and then add those to your image in that tool. And again, I don't see how that would be in violation of a club rule, because everything you're using is your own photograph, your own texture photograph, as well as your, camera photograph.
Correct. And that is basically our motto is everything in your photograph should be your own image.
Yeah.
Hi, Brad. This is Roxanne. I have a quick question, or my question is, have you ever used your iPhone for astrophotography using it with a telescope?
I have not. I've explored, night photography just with the phone without accessory lenses. I've never done anything as dramatic as that, where you could connect it to an actual telescope.
Okay, thank you. I was just with that said, are there any other types of accessories, equipment? Like you had your list of tripods and you talked about lenses. Are there other good things that are out there that would help with photography?
Well, definitely a tripod if you're going to do anything that is a long exposure. And because I shoot with a big camera too, I often use my big camera tripod for both my phone and my big camera. But because the phone is so light, you don't have to have a heavy duty tripod. You can get by with a smaller, lighter weight tripod for traveling. Accessory lenses, I used to use them quite a bit, but now that we have 120 millimeter telephoto lens and a 13 millimeter ultra wide, I use them less. But there's one company called Moment. Their glass is excellent if you want accessory lenses. I'm not real keen on their lens attachment method. You have to use a case that they provide, and they have a bayonet type attachment mechanism. I prefer another company called Sandmark. Sandmark, you still have to use their case. You put your phone in their case, but their lenses are threaded and they screw into that case. You're not going to get them attached incorrectly, which I've done with the Moments. and knocked them off the camera. And, you know, at $100 a pop, you don't want to be dropping those on a concrete surface, which I've done. So those are some, you can get ultra wide, fisheye. Macro is amazing to add a macro accessory filter to your camera. If you enjoy macro photography. So those are some of the other things that I enjoy. And then other than that, infrared, and I think I showed you the filter and the attachment for that, those accessories.
Okay, let's take a couple more questions. I see one, Ed Log. Ed, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, I'm going to be taking photos of an eclipse, possibly in April, and I didn't know if you had any suggestions for that.
Boy, you know, I don't, but I'm exploring the same thing. And there's a fellow that I just met recently. I'm going to be doing an out of Chicago live presentation in February, and one of the other instructors, his first name is Gabe, and I can't think of his last name, but he works for B&H. And he is also a night photographer. What I'll do in the slides that I'm going to send you, I will include Gabe's contact information. He'd be a great resource to ask about that question. I don't know. I've started exploring the same thing. I'm going to do some big camera photography to shoot the eclipse, but I'd also like to try and do it with the phone. I know for the big camera, it requires a certain filter, and I'm not sure if a similar filter is necessary with the iPhone or not.
I do have some filters, but they're handheld currently, so I'm going to have to try that on the moon or something to see. But right now, my iPhone won't focus on the sun through the filters.
Oh, it won't focus on the sun through the filters. Well, again, make sure, this is a thought, depending on which phone you have, make sure that you have turned macro mode on in the settings, and then go to your camera interface, get close to something, and you'll see that icon turn on for macro mode. Make sure you turn it off, because if macro mode is on while you have a filter over the lenses, it can get confused on what it's trying to focus on.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Jim Koski.
Jim?
Hi, Jim.
Yeah, hi. Hey, we were in Costa Rica a month or two ago, and we had a guide a couple of times, and he was able to take our phone and put it up to his spotting scope, and the image was remarkably good in the phone. And I'm just curious, yeah, if they could do a telescope that way.
I've seen this done as well. I've never done it myself. I remember several years ago seeing there was an article about this journalist who was who used his iPhone and binoculars to photograph the Olympics from the peanut gallery. You know, he was way up in the nosebleed section, and his photographs were remarkable. So it definitely can be done. I believe there might even be some tools that help you make that connection between the phone and the spotting scope. But I have not explored that.
I do know that, and I've got friends that do this. They're all into astrophotography, but long range astro, and they attach their iPhones and they take photos directly from the telescope to their iPhone.
There you go. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, Rad, that was so excellent. We had so much information come out of it. We had a lot of people listening, and I'm sure they will get a lot out of it. I know I did. I do like to use I use my big cameras all the time, but I've been using the iPhone more and more, and you just made it so I'll use it even more. So thank you very, very much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. I invite, you know, if anybody has questions, by all means, you know, reach out. I don't travel again until the end of February, so I'm around and, I'm not